Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. And today we are going to talk about something that happens in probably 80% of households with picky eaters. And the crazy part is that most parents don't even realize that they are doing this. If you put a plate in front of your kid with foods they like, right? We're talking about even just preferred foods here. Your kid might eat some of what you put in front of them and then ask for more of their favorite, right? And because they're eating something, you give them more cereal or more blueberries, whatever they're asking for more of, because they're eating. And most parents just don't see in that one moment that you might have actually made the pickiness a little bit worse. So let me explain. Let's back up, because I know that could sound harsh, but stick with me here because the fix is so much simpler than you think. And it's the foundation, actually, of everything that we teach to parents in our course, which is why I wanted to share it with you. Because this is something that even if you don't have a severely picky child, we don't want to make them pickier, right? So this is going to actually help hopefully prevent some of that from happening. So this one boundary changes how your kid eats, but more importantly, it changes how your kid is relating to food. And it has a ripple effect, a pretty big one. So let's talk about it and dive in. All right, so here's what I see happening in family after family. A parent puts together a thoughtful plate. You're trying, you've got some favorite food, some fruits, maybe some protein, but your child gravitates towards the one favorite thing. Maybe it's the cereal or the pasta, whatever it is. They eat it, they like it, and they want more. So the parent thinks they're eating. So if I'm giving them more of what keeps them eating, that's a win, right? I get it. I really do. But you're trying to keep your kid fed and happy, which is definitely important. But here's what's actually happening. Your child just learned something. Not what you wanted them to learn. They learned that if they eat the thing they like, they are going to get more of it, and they can avoid the other foods entirely. And this is where the pattern starts to solidify. So over the next few weeks, sometimes just days, the foods that lost against the cereal start becoming non-preferreds. The mango goes from sometimes to no thanks, not today. The blueberries go from accepted to ew, I don't like that. Your child's food preferences are shrinking, and you didn't mean for that to happen, but that's what happens when you keep feeding the pattern, okay? And plus, this is important, cereal and carbs alone, right? Because it almost always is the carb that gets eaten first. Almost always, not in every case. But they don't actually fill kids up. So your child probably is eating a bunch of the carb. Let's just say, for example, cereal. That's just going to satisfy them for 15 minutes, and then they're going to be hungry again. It's an endless cycle. So the pickiness you're seeing, a lot of it isn't about your child being completely naturally picky. Sometimes it's the patterns that parents are accidentally creating. But the good news is that patterns can be changed. We can reverse those things, right? So here's the boundary, and it's simple enough. If all the foods on the plate are accepted foods, so foods your child already knew, you know that they're going to eat, they like them, then they finish the plate before they get any more of any of the foods that are already on the plate. That's it. So let me say that again, okay? They're going to finish the plate before they get more of whatever was already on the plate, okay? So think about that. If you give them a bowl with, or a plate with some dried cereal, blueberries, and mangoes, before they get more of the cereal or more of the blueberries or more of the mangoes, they have to eat the whole plate. Okay? If they don't eat the whole plate, they don't get more of just the cereal. Like, you can't just eat the cereal and then say, I want more cereal, and get more cereal and ignore the other things on the plate. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So there is an important caveat here, because if you're introducing a new food that your child is learning about, I would say that would be separate from this. It could even go on a separate learning plate where there is no pressure to eat it. You're not forcing them to eat it. It's just there so they can get familiar with it at their own place using other strategies that we work with. But again, for these foods, let's just assume that everything on their plate is an accepted food already. Those stay together. That plate should be finished before they can have more. And I'm not saying more of, oh, when you finish this plate, then you could have candy, or then you could have the other cereal. This is the meal that mom has put together or dad has put together for you. This is what you're eating. If you want more of any of it, you have to finish what's on your plate. And I could already hear some of you thinking and your wheels turning, but they're going to freak out when I implement this. Yeah, maybe. They might. Probably. They probably will a little bit, especially if this is the first time you're ever pushing back. And that's important. It's a really important part of this conversation because when you set this boundary, your child is almost expected to push back. They're going to test it. They might even cry. They might tell you being mean. They might say they're not eating unless they can get more of their favorite. And here's what you really need to understand. The pushback is not a sign that the boundary itself is wrong. It's a sign that the boundary is working, right? Your child has been operating under a totally different system. They've learned that negotiation works, that holding out works, that asking nicely works. So when you change the rules, they're going to try every tactic to get you to break. The first week will be the hardest week, maybe the second week too, but around week 3, the testing is going to stop. Your child is going to realize the boundary is real. It doesn't change when they cry. It doesn't change when a different parent does it. Okay, you have to be uniform in this. It doesn't change when they protest. It just is. Because let me tell you right now, if you say, no, this is what we have, this is your choice, you could eat it or not eat it. And if they ask 10 times and on the 11th time you say, oh, fine, just have it. Just have whatever you want. Okay. All they've learned is that, oh, if I keep going, I will get whatever I want. So you have to be ready for the protest and you have to stay steady and firm. But something will shift and they will stop fighting it. They will eat their plate if they choose. And over time, foods that were, not their favorite ones will become a normal part of their eating again. Maybe not even their true favorites, but accepted, familiar, part of their plate, part of how they eat. And this is a foundation. This is where everything really starts. And why does this work so incredibly well, right? Why do we use this very important boundary? First, there's exposure. So the more your child is seeing the food regularly on their plate, even if they're not eating much of it, the more familiar it becomes. And that is really important because familiarity is going to reduce things like fear over time. It's going to change these patterns. It's going to make them more flexible. Second, there's that satiety piece. So when kids are only eating their preferred foods, which are usually carbs and sugar, they get a quick energy hit, but it's not going to stick. Their blood sugar will crash. They're hungry again in 15 minutes. But when they eat variety, when they eat the cereal and the blueberries and the mango, their body actually gets sustained nutrition. They're going to feel full. They'll be satisfied longer. Their hunger cues will work better. Third, and this is very huge, you're breaking this pattern. You're not making the pickiness worse. Most parents don't realize they're actually creating pickiness by accident. But when you hold the boundary, you put a stop to that from happening. You prevent it from spiraling and getting worse. But here's the thing. The boundary is really just the beginning. This is a very foundational one piece of a bigger puzzle. Once you get this solid, there's a system that we build on top of that. There's strategies for dealing with texture issues. There's ways to introduce new foods that actually work. There's techniques for expanding what your kid will eat without force or pressure. There's specific scripts and things that we can say that work really well with your child's personality. But none of that it's not going to work if you don't have this very easy foundational piece in place first, which is why we built our course around it, because we've seen what happens when parents get this right. And we've also seen what happens when they skip it or try to do everything at once. Doesn't work. So the boundary, not just mealtime hack, it's really the first step in a totally different way of approaching your picky eater. And it's very doable. So if you're listening and thinking, all right, I'm going to try this, here's how I want you to try. First, mentally prepare. Know that your kid is probably going to resist. Don't go into this surprised or second guessing yourself. Expect pushback. That's how you can stay calm when it actually happens. Okay? So when I say prepare for pushback, have your line ready to go. Okay? So the line is, this is the choice you have, right? You can either eat what's on your plate and then get more of what was on your plate, or you don't have to eat it. You can walk away, but I'm not just going to keep giving you the more of what you want, right? So, second, pick one meal to start this with. I would pick one meal and I try to continue on from there. If you feel like it's not possible to do, then maybe that's the rule that happens always at dinner time or always at breakfast. But I think it's going to be easier for you if you keep the rule in place for all of the meals and snacks. But if it's hard, start with snack first, okay? Third, use the learning plate. So for anything new, if you're introducing something your child hasn't seen before, that can be separate, or that can be excluded from your plate has to be finished. And that's how we get around your plate has to be finished. So let's just say you had a plate of food and maybe it's pasta, but you also wanted to expose them to a green bean. Great. I wouldn't say, oh, you have to eat all the pasta and all the green beans to get more pasta. The green bean might be moved to a learning plate, which is a separate plate right next to their regular plate where they can practice their learning. We have so many strategies for that. We're not getting into that today, but using their curiosity language, maybe using some science-based approaches. Anyway, that's their plate. But again, it's the plate that's in front of them, the plate with their preferred foods. That's what needs to be completed before they get more of whatever was on their plate to begin with. Okay. And the fourth, remember, you got to stay consistent. This is the hard part. Okay. Every single meal, every time, no exceptions, every parent, every caregiver. Okay. Because your child will test to see if the rule changes. Does the rule change if grandma's here? Does the rule change if dad's here? Okay. And if it does, you just taught them that persistence works and pushing back with certain adults will work. And that's really the opposite of what you want. I really also encourage you, like we said, don't break under pressure. I know it's hard when your kids are upset, but if you give in because they're crying, you've just taught them that crying is what's going to work to get them what they want. And then you're back to square one. What you can do absolutely is validate their feelings, but hold the boundary. So what does that look like? I know you're so frustrated. It's really hard when grown-ups make the rules. I know you really wanted more cereal right now. I understand that you're feeling sad about this, but the choice is yours, okay? The rule is not changing because you are sad. And I always do this when I am enforcing a boundary with my son. I'm always saying things like, Mommy loves you so much. I know, I'm so sorry that this rule made you feel frustrated. It's not I made you feel frustrated. It's the rule made you feel frustrated. You didn't like the rule that the grown-ups made, right? But it doesn't change the fact that I love you very much. I'm not doing it because I'm mad at you or because you did something wrong. You're not punished. This is just the rule. Mommies and daddies make rules to keep kids safe and healthy. It's just like cut and dry, and it is what it is. You just are going to be quick and to the point, right? You can give hugs. That rules are hard. Kids have a hard time adjusting to new routines and rules, but that doesn't mean they can't do it. It doesn't mean they're not capable of it. And certainly, and I'm speaking to a specific segment of parents here, even if your child has something like autism and you're thinking, this is just not going to apply because my kid can't handle that. He has autism. Absolutely, your child can handle that. I have worked with extremely severe children with autism who are absolutely, in fact, autism and other developmental disabilities as well, like Down syndrome, they actually thrive really well with specific rules, specific sets of rules, because they know it's very black and white to them. It's just, this is the rule. When it's a black and white type of a rule like that, they actually do very well. So you might be shocked, but a lot of parents are very much, oh, but they have a disability, so they can't. No, your child is strong. They absolutely can. You're not giving them enough credit, truly, because they can absolutely do things like this. Like I said, I've worked with perhaps some of the most severe children, and there's very few that I would say wouldn't qualify well for this type of a strategy. Very few. I'm sure there are some, absolutely. I'm not saying that every single child should be using this exact strategy, but for the most part, absolutely, they can handle this. And being that support person and holding the boundary, validate their feelings, but hold the line. That's the balance. You're going to validate their feelings. I know this is hard. I know it's tricky when mommy and daddy make the rules. I know you really want that right now. I see you're frustrated. I see you're upset about it. Okay, that's validating the feelings, but hold the line on the other side. But these are the rules. But these are your choices. You can eat it or not eat it. That's holding the line while validating their feelings. And that's the balance. Okay, again, first week or two might be uncomfortable. By week 3, you should not have an issue. Something will shift. Okay, the boundary is just normal rules, and then you can move forward. So why am I spending this whole episode on this one boundary? Because I've worked with hundreds of families with picky eaters, and the ones who get the biggest transformations, they're the ones who understand that pickiness isn't something that happens to them. It's something that is created by a series of patterns over time, and those patterns can be changed. But it requires a system. It requires understanding why your kid is picky, routines. It requires knowing how to introduce new foods. It requires strategies for dealing with sometimes texture issues, sensory stuff, oral motor stuff, all of it. The boundary is one small piece, one small step. But step 1 only works if you know what steps 2, 3, and 4 are, which is why we have a course, which is why we have a program. Because we kept seeing parents nail one piece and then hit a wall because they didn't know what to do next. Or they'd implement one thing and then try random things that actually undid some of the other progress. So, we want sequential progress that continues to build. And that's why we have a more in-depth program for parents who want more specific guidance and more hand-holding and more one-to-one support. Okay, but this one strategy is part of a foundation and it works. And if you want the whole system, the strategies, the framework, the step-by-step approach, the guidance, the one-to-one help to actually transform how your child eats, that's what we do inside of our program. I'm not saying you need the program to understand this boundary. You don't. You can absolutely implement this as a standalone skill. But if you're tired of fighting with your kids about food, if you're tired of not being able to order or go to dinner or go on vacation because your kids aren't eating the foods, it's a bigger problem than just picky eating. So if you want a system instead of just tips and tricks, if you want to actually solve the problem and not just manage it and figure out ways around it, but solve it, that we're where parents go when nothing else has worked for them. I'm very excited for you to get started and try this out. And I'd love to hear how it's going. Please reach out to us and comment below the video and let us know how this strategy is working. Was there even pushback? Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes kids are like, okay. Some kids are more easygoing and they're like, all right, I'll do that. You might be like, wait, there's no pushback? That wasn't hard. This worked out really well. So you never know. But generally, parents know their kids and they'll know if they are expecting some pushback. But our program in general isn't for everyone. It's for parents who are ready to solve the problem, not just manage it. And it's really a whole system. So I'm excited for you to learn this little piece of our system. And I really hope that it helps to improve your meal times and make everything a lot smoother and generally less stressful and more healthy as well, right? We want our kids to eat a variety of different foods. It's really important for their gut and their focus and their learning. Yeah, we're here. I'm excited for you guys. I hope you have a great week or 2 weeks, and we'll see you in the next episode.